get your attention? We're going to start. So, welcome to our audience. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to this event where we're going to talk about sustainable dairy production, greenhouse gas emissions, and beyond, with a particular focus on the work that's going on inside Latin America. My name's Donald Moore. I'm the Executive Director at the Global Dairy Platform, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to this event today. We have a panel of distinguished people who are here to talk to us today, and we also have a pre-recorded message from one of our speakers who unfortunately wasn't able to travel to UAE for the event today. So with that, I want to start maybe with a little bit of background about sustainability in the dairy sector. And on your chairs, you'll find a copy of a recent report that's come out from the Dairy Sustainability Framework, which is just a progress report on the work that's going on with sustainability in the dairy sector around the world. Now, the Dairy Sustainability Framework was launched 10 years ago this year. In fact, it was launched during the World Dairy Summit that was held in Yokohama, Japan back in 2013. So this is its 10th anniversary. And over that 10-year period, we've been collecting data, analyzing and reporting the sustainability progress of the dairy sector around the world. Currently, the DSF accounts for around 30% of all dairy produced in the world, which is around 50%, just over 50% of the formal milk, because there's quite a few countries in the world that don't process all their milk. It gets traded locally at a local level. So in the Dairy Sustainability Framework, if you take a look at the paper that you've got, and you can take it home and study it, there'll be no test on it today, you'll notice that we also list out each year what are the top priorities for the dairy sector. In 2023, or 2022's report, which was just produced, you'll notice that I think the top item is animal care. Prior to that, it was actually always greenhouse gas emissions. So recognizing over this 10-year period that greenhouse gas emissions was such a critical issue for the global dairy sector, back in 2021, the Global Dairy Platform, along with 5 other organizations, launched a program called Pathways to Dairy Net Zero. Now, that program was based upon an FAO study, which I have one copy of here, but there are a couple of copies of the short version of the report. This study looked at emissions from the global dairy cattle sector over a 10-year period from 2005, 2010, 2015. And in that 10-year period, this report noted that the emissions intensity, in other words, the amount of greenhouse gas produced per kilogram of milk, had reduced by 11%. So intensity had gone down. However, at the same time, the amount of milk being produced globally had risen by 30%. So an increase in production by 30%. And the authors of the report noted if we hadn't made some of the improvements in the dairy sector that we had, absolute emissions would have gone up by 38% rather than absolute emissions rising 18%. But that for us in the dairy sector was a little bit of a challenge. And we said, if we are going to have a industry that sustains over the long term, then we need to make sure that we are able to address absolute emissions from the dairy sector, not just the emission intensity. And so that led us to launch this program, Pathways to Dairy Net Zero. So these 2 programs that we're going to talk about today are actually linked very, very closely together. One measuring our sustainability performance, and the other really pushing us in terms of the reductions that we need to make, particularly in greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of the program, Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, there's really 2 streams of activity running in parallel. One is in developed markets, and the other is in emerging dairy economies. And we're going to talk a little more about that today. But I guess the challenge for us is that this report also told us, the report that was produced by FAO, that around 80% of emissions from the dairy sector come from those emerging or developing dairy economies. So for us, that was a real challenge that we needed to come up with a strategy and a plan on how we could address that emission reduction in emerging economies. So with that, we worked very closely with the Global Methane Pledge and with the US State Department, the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, and Cornell University, and came up with a tabulation of every country in the world producing dairy and looking at the emissions profile of those countries, and came up with a list of 10 countries that between them account for 30% of emissions. And those 10 countries were then approached by the US State Department, the Minister of Agriculture, to invite them to become early adopters of the Pathways program. Of the 10, the first cohort was in East Africa, and that's Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, and Uganda. And they are working very closely in partnership with IFAD, FAO, the Green Climate Fund. We're about to put a submission into the Green Climate Fund for $400 million worth of funding to start the transformation process in East Africa. The second cohort we're going to talk about today, and that's in Latin America, and in particular Costa Rica, Colombia, and Uruguay. And we'll hear from some of the speakers today about the work that's going on to start to develop a submission for that part of the world as well. The last countries on our list are Pakistan, where we'll be kicking off in February next year, and then Vietnam and India. India is the only country that we're still in discussions about them joining the program. But the idea behind picking these 10 countries was to have a range of countries with different production systems, different environmental conditions, different policy requirements, so that other countries in the world could say, I see how what you're doing in Uruguay or what you're doing in Costa Rica or Tanzania might apply in my own market, and therefore to inspire them to also embark upon a Pathways to Dairy Net Zero program. So that's a little bit of background on the program itself and the linkage between Pathways and the Dairy Sustainability Framework. And with that, I'd like to introduce my panelists today, and we're missing one, so we're going to have to cover for him. But the panelists starting on my right, your left, Maria Nube. Maria is with the Ministry of Agriculture for the government of Uruguay. Next to Maria is Maria Mercedes Proano, who is with the FAO, based in Santiago, Chile. So welcome. And our last speaker on the panel today needs little or no introduction to most people at the COP meetings, and that's Lloyd Day, who is the Assistant Director General of IECA, whose pavilion we are very grateful for you to have allowed us to use today, Mr. Day. So thank you for joining us too. We'll also have a presentation online, a video that's been pre-recorded by Ariel Ladonsky, who is the Director General of FEPALE, the Latin American Dairy Industry Association, and he happens to be based out of Uruguay as well. Ariel may be joining us online. I'm not sure, but if he does join us online, unfortunately, he won't be able to intervene. So we'll play his pre-recording. So with that, let me just start perhaps with our panel and a few opening remarks from each of you. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourselves a little more fully than I have to start with those. So Maria Nube, would you like to start off with an introduction?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I tried to move and the microphone is trying to kill me. But I'm Maria Nube Cepegui. I work at the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries at a particular unit that focuses on sustainability and climate change. And I'm working mostly on resource mobilization to implement actions related to sustainability and climate change. I'm a biologist. I don't know much about cows. I know much more about climate change and sustainability, so this is a challenge for me.
Fantastic. So let me just ask you a first question then, now that you've introduced yourself. Thank you for that. So in the context of dairy systems in Uruguay, how can initiatives like Pathways to Dairy Net Zero contribute to enhancing the efficiency and sustainability of your dairy sector?
Maybe I can tell a little bit about Uruguay. So we are a small country. We are 3 million people. And the dairy sector has 3,300 farms. So it's quite a small sector if we compare with the rest of the world. If you see efficiency, when in this worldwide analysis, we are second after New Zealand. So it seems that we are quite efficient and everything works well. But if you take a look in more detail in these farms, we have some farmers that are extremely efficient and some others that are really, really bad at productivity and also about emissions. When we do the footprint, the carbon footprint of the different farms, we see a great variety. And the other important thing is that our industry is also small. We have like 6 industries, and one of them concentrates 70% of the production. And they have a really close relation with farmers. So Pathways to Dairy Net Zero means an opportunity to bring everyone to work together. What we have done, and because of the recommendation of FAO, we created a task force to develop the initiative, and the research institutions are there. The Dairy Institute, National Institute is there, that groups of farmers and also industry. We have the Ministry of Finance involved. So it was a great opportunity to look at the entire chain together and try to think what we want for the future and how we are going to make these steps. So it was like there were different initiatives related to the sector, especially working on water quality and the impact of dairy sector into water quality, and some work on finance and how to develop credit for the sector. But at this time, we brought together during the past year everyone on board and tried to discuss together which were the different actions that we had to implement to bring synergies with other national strategies. So I think it was a great opportunity for us to plan the sector and the entire chain.
Yeah, and you've made a really good point around the opportunity even to improve just across the existing system. So I know when we started Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, one of the things that the Global Research Alliance, who's our knowledge partner in the program, said was they said, if you could take good practice and implement it across all dairy systems worldwide, we would improve we would reduce emissions from the dairy sector by up to 40%. And even if you take one country like Uruguay, if you plotted all of your dairy farmers across the country on a normal distribution, you'll find, as you've just pointed out, that there are farms that are underperforming relative to their cohort, the other farms in their area. And that applies not just in Uruguay, that applies in the United States where I'm living, New Zealand where I was living before. That same issue, Lloyd, don't look at me like that, it was living there, I didn't say born there. So that applies in all different markets as well. And so, one of the things we know is there are significant gains to be made in dairy globally by applying good practice in different marketplaces. On top of that, if we could take the technologies that we have available today and implement them everywhere, we'd get maybe another 35% gain. So there's still an opportunity for new technology and new investments to come along as well. So that's, I think, a great segue. But one last question I wanted to ask you before I move on is, maybe just talk a little more about the specific challenges and indeed the opportunities that you see inside Uruguay within the dairy system itself.
We were discussing this before, and there are different challenges depending on what dimension we are looking at. If we look at the farms, one of the challenges is that we've been losing farmers in the last decades, and the ones that stay there are getting old and they don't want to invest and make changes because they are about to retire, and maybe the kids are not staying in the rural areas, they are moving to the cities, so they're really not seeing a future of the farm. So one of the things that we've been discussing in relation to Pathways to Dairy Net Zero is the potential to create these new initiatives and try to bring young farmers to the rural areas again, because the dairy farms, 85–86% of them, they live in the rural area. They are not just owners of the farm, so they live there and they are part of these populations, and we don't want to lose them from there. So one of the things is age and the challenges to access to credit, for instance, is they don't want to get indebted if they maybe in 4 or 5 years they are going to be retired. So that is one issue. The other issue that we see is more technical, and most of the dairy farms in Uruguay are based on grass. So one of all these additives and new technologies, we're trying to how to make it possible to, these inhibitors of emissions and how to apply that for farm management. We have a challenge in infrastructure. Most of our dairy farms don't have special installments, how do you call it? the places for shade and for the cows to rest. So there are also some impacts there in efficiency and health for the animals, and that most of them require credit, but they don't want to access to credit because they're about to retire. So that's about the farms itself. But then we have another issue about the scale of our industry. It's quite a small country, it's quite a small industry, especially for instance, management, water management, treatment for water management requires some investment. That's because of the scale. It's not worth it for the companies, the big companies, to invest on those. So that's another challenge. And I think the most important one is markets, because most of our products are not, they don't have added value because of sustainability, and the industries have been trying to reach these markets that value that, but it hasn't been that easy. So we don't have this tracking from the market side to push the industry and the farms to change some behavior. So that makes critical that for the government to be involved and try to create the right incentives for every step, so we can make that transition.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's really interesting. And we'll have a chance a little later on for you as an audience to ask questions. So start thinking about what you might want to ask our panelists. Maria Mercedes, if I can come to you for a moment. So FAO is actually a partner in the Pathways to Dairy Net Zero program overall, and we thank you greatly for the leadership that we receive from FAO. In fact, your organization is involved not only in the work in Latin America, but also actively leading the technical assessments that are going on in East Africa, and we're hoping will be involved in Pakistan as well. But in terms of the work that's been going on so far in the Latin American context, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Uruguay, do you want to talk briefly about the submission that you're working on for the Green Climate Fund, and in relation particular to the Pathways to Dairy Net Zero work?
Thank you, Donald. My name is Maria Mercedes Proaño. I'm the Climate Finance Officer for the regional office in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is based in Santiago. And there is where we help offices in like FAO Uruguay that provides assistance to Nubes office. And we help FAO Colombia and FAO Costa Rica, who are also part of this initiative. And this is the main opportunity that we have seen, the possibility of exchanges in between countries. But before I get to that, I would like to highlight what Nube mentioned, which is the possibility of making sure that there is an intersectorial dialogue in the country for the dairy sector. When we started off with Pathways, because of our approach that is very bottom-up, we approached the countries along with the Pathways, with the Global Dairy Platform, and we asked them, would you like to participate? And we received a willingness, political willingness from the different countries. But now, how do you want to participate? And so we started building together. With this, we created a task force for the 3 countries. We put together the main ideas, and then each country went back and created this national task force that Nube mentioned, which was a specific space for intergovernmental dialogue. The private sector was also brought in. Ministries of not foreign affairs, but you said finance were brought in. That's very important because finance needs to be included there. So we applaud this, the fact that the governments, not only agriculture was part of the initiative, but also include other institutions and other actors that need to participate in order to build a national position and then add up to a regional position. And then where are we now? As Nube mentioned, each country has put together their task force. They have agreed on what the project needs to look like. We have put together a project idea profile, if you will, and we have already made informal discussions with the donor. And we believe that multicultural programs like this would provide, welcome, would provide a platform to share experiences. Yeah, that's okay. What happens in the livestock sector, dairy sector in Uruguay is not the same as what happens in Colombia, what happens in Costa Rica. And so exchanges is very important. Innovation is very important. And so we have already started to see that, the
the knowledge sharing, and mainly the innovation is what I would like to highlight. Some countries have a specific advantages. Some other countries have specific territories where things happen differently. In some countries, we are going to work with indigenous communities. In others, we're not. So these three countries have a variety of situations, and we are learning from each other based on the dairy sector. So the initial steps have been to make sure that we are aligned, that there's political willingness, there is technical assistance. That's why the coordination has always been very close with CAF, and of course with the Global Dairy Platform, to make sure that not only mitigation actions are taking place, but also adaptations. We're aiming for a cross-cutting approach because it is what it is in the territory. It's not only mitigation, but also it is adaptation. The region is affected by climate change. Adaptation is really something we need to look into, and we've seen it in other countries. So it is a cross-cutting initiative, and we're very happy that we managed to produce it like that.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it really, and that one of the key challenges in taking on something of this transformative nature is making sure that you take all parties with you. I think there's an old proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And
Exactly.
you've certainly done a great job, I think, with FAO and in partnership with CAF in bringing those countries together and getting that collaborative effort underway. Just before I move on, though, how FAO is supporting efforts towards more sustainable dairy systems in South America? I mean, you're obviously working in other markets as well, but just do you want to make any other comments about the work that you're doing as FAO more broadly than just Pathways?
Definitely. In Pathways, we're trying to either scale up or to implement what we have done even in Uruguay with national projects. And what we've done in other regions, we've put together initiatives funded by the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, on climate-smart livestock in Uruguay, in Ecuador, and in the Dominican Republic, where we have been able to implement adaptation practices, mitigation as a co-benefit as well, or adaptation practices directly to working with farmers on farm, on site, climate resilient practices. And the most important thing that we've managed to do with the dairy sector and the livestock sector together is to mobilize resources. We've been able, in the case of Ecuador, to bring the national banking. There is a national bank in Ecuador called Ban Ecuador, that put together, during the duration of the project, put together a credit line for farmers that would implement, small farmers, of course, that would implement climate-smart livestock activities. And that is something that helped us a lot, and that we're trying to scale up with Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, with CAF, and with the experience with CAF, with financing mechanisms, because we are the experts on technical assistance. We work with the farmers. The farmers know what they have to do. There is an exchange and knowledge. We do that. But there's a gap on financing. If we do not reach farmers with the proper financing, as Nuva mentioned, then there's no innovation, there's no technology, and this is important. And we managed to do that with this project in Ecuador. But we had other initiatives. Capacity building is done in Costa Rica with big cooperatives on the dairy sector. This is why Costa Rica is also participating. And also Costa Rica, and I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here, Costa Rica has also received support from the FAO and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition for monitoring progress related to MRV and issues related to MRV, which is very important now in the context of the COP that we're talking to. And so these are the main things that we would like to scale up when it comes to Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, and we're very, very excited to be able to partner with CAF on this.
I think great segue to our latest panelists. So Ignacio Lorenzo, welcome to the panel. I know you've been running around in different meetings, so we really appreciate you making time for us today as well. Ignacio is the Director of Technical Advisory and Biodiversity and Climate at CAF, the Latin American Development Bank. I'm not going to try and pronounce the actual name of the bank, but just if we can stay with CAF, Nacho. But what is CAF's role in promoting sustainability in the dairy sector across the region that you're operating in. Would you mind sharing some thoughts with us, please?
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for the invitation. I believe it's our third or fourth event here in the pavilion, and it's great to be here again. Thank you so much. And also discussing a very important topic. Agriculture and livestock in our region is essential in terms of strategic, in terms of economy, in terms of jobs, in terms of income, in terms also of the relationship with biodiversity and ecosystems. So indeed, having a very clear strategic work across all sectors, but then in specific areas of agriculture and livestock is also essential. In the case of CAF, we are definitely a development bank, and we are on a long work, mainly in infrastructure, but from recently we have also tried to look for other key areas in a region that we can also support our countries. And of course, agriculture, as I said, is essential. So we established a very good partnership with ICA in terms of strategic approach, and also in specific projects as FAO on livestock for dairy as well. So the idea is for us to facilitate a process where we can scale up finance, and we see ourselves in that relationship. In particular, in terms of canalizing green funds, not only from in the UNFCCC format or context, but also CAF has issued several times green bonds, for example, that definitely improves the conditions and rates for that credit to go into the region. So catalyzing green finance, and also making a scale for finance as a whole in our countries. In particular, in the dairy sector, we see it as a key sector in terms of, well, of course, food production, but of course as well in terms of jobs, in terms of the relationship again with issues of mitigation and adaptation to climate change due to vulnerability, but also due to emissions. And in some of the countries that we are working this platform is also a key strategic sector, for example, in terms of exports as well. So the issue of quality, the issue of ensuring all processes are also becoming key strategic. So in particular, we see the CAF participation as facilitating scale-up finance, and that also speaks to a strategic area of us, which is to secure at least 40% of all our finance in the region for green activities. And we see that not only in terms of mitigation, but mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, and ecosystems as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And in this particular program, CAF, as an accredited entity with the Green Climate Fund, will act as the entity that makes the final submission to the Green Climate Fund. So, Nacho, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for the leadership you're providing in that financial area. Before I go to Lloyd, we do have a short video where Ariel Ladonsky, who wasn't able to join us today, is going to talk a little more about the work that's going on, the collaborative effort that's going on across Latin America on the other part of this equation, which is bringing into play the measurement of sustainability through the Dairy Sustainability Framework and pilots that they're planning to run there. So could we play Ariel's video? No.
Hello, I am Ariel Londinsky, Secretary General of the Pan American Dairy Federation. It's very nice to greet you. Milk and dairy products are widely recognized as an important part of a healthy diet, yet producers, processors, and other links in the value chain face real and perceived challenges as they strive to demonstrate the sustainability credentials of the dairy chain. Latin America is one of the most booming regions in food productions, being one of the great food pantries of the world. Specifically, the production of milk and dairy products represents one of the areas of greatest development, importance, and social sustenance in all countries, and is a fundamental tool for food security. The demand for food and for dairy products in particular has been growing in recent years, and our region is one of those with the greatest global potential to continue growing and supplying this demand. The growth must go hand in hand with sustainability criteria and the challenge of achieving growth in production while maintaining and increasing sustainability standards is one of the greatest challenges facing the region. And to this situation of heterogeneity in production system, there are also points in common that make it possible to develop regional or sub-regional strategies, especially by measuring their impacts and implementing regional applicable practices. Collaborative actions allow all actors in the sector to successfully address these concerns and build for future business resilience in a sustainable manner. It is in collaborative action that the synergy between FEPALE, AICA, and DSF can have a special relevance. For some time now, all countries have begun to implement various continuous improvement and sustainable actions in the search for growth in production while taking care of environmental, social, and economic aspects, although with the varied approaches and progress. However, these efforts at the national level are not coordinated at the regional level and do not follow collaborative parameters. At the same time, there is no assertive communication of this practice to society, and especially of the progress and commitment of the sector in general to sustainable practices. This is very greater collaboration and synergy are required among the countries of the region to coordinate national efforts for continuous improvement and sustainability. This includes the creation of a joint agenda to establish common objectives, promote the implementation of sustainable practice with a collaborative vision and the monitoring of key indicators. Thus, we are working on a concrete project called Agenda for Sustainable Development of the Dairy Sector in Latin America, which is collaborative effort between FEPALE, AICA, DSF, and we have requested the support of the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF. The proposal includes advancing in the construction of this agenda in a coordinated manner, developing a program based on a vision and a methodology that will allow us to enrich and consolidate the initiative that already exists or that may be generated, for which we will use the DSF model. In this way, we will be able to adopt the pre-competitive and collaborative approach of the DSF, allowing the Latin America dairy sector to connect and learn about experience from other global dairy representatives, how challenges can be overcome based on this previous experience, thus accelerating change. There are sufficient regional and international sectoral institutions to support the project and ensure its sustainability and continuity once it is and running. We have made progress and are working on this specific project involving FEPALE, DSF, AICA, and we are making progress in the possibility of incorporating the Development Bank for Latin America, CAF. We will also have the support of the Global Dairy Platform. The dairy sector in Latin America is committed to providing healthy food to its inhabitants and to the world, as well as taking care of sustainability parameters. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ariel Londinsky, as well, for, unfortunately, as I said, he wasn't able to be with us today. But I think it's important when we think about sustainability that we think about the two ends of this spectrum. One is measuring and reporting the progress that we're making, the MRV type model, and then also driving for that change from the top down. Now, before I go to Lloyd, a moment for you all to think to yourselves about what questions you'd like to ask our panel. And I'm also delighted to welcome Dr. Lal, former winner of the World Food Prize, to our event as well. So, Dr. Lal, lovely to see you again. Lloyd, if I can come to you next. So, Lloyd, about 3 years ago now, I think you and I put together a forum in conjunction with ICA and Global Dairy Platform where we presented sustainable dairying and the concept of dairy transformation for Latin America, and actually shared the work that was going on from the Dairy Sustainability Framework, the early concept behind Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, and I think we even wrote a publication together as a result. So we've been working on this as, collectively for some time now. But, I'd be fascinated, when I think about the role that ICA plays across the Americas, but maybe you'd like to comment on the collaborations that ICA's leading and involved with right across the Americas, not just Latin America necessarily, and the joint programs that you've got to promote sustainability more generally and through the dairy sector as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Donald. And for those of you who don't know, I think most of you here in the audience know very well, but maybe online, those tuning in may not know what ICA is. ICA is the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. We represent the 34 ministers of agriculture of the Western Hemisphere, from Canada in the north to Argentina and Chile in the south, and 14 islands and countries in the Caribbean. And by representing the ministers of agriculture, we also represent really the farmers and ranchers of the Americas. And Donald, in every country, our offices are working very closely with the dairy sector on a variety of different projects, be it in Chile, good agricultural practices for sustainability, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Colombia, all the countries that were mentioned. But we really started beginning our collaboration around the time where there was this global narrative saying that animal agriculture was terrible. It was terrible for the environment, it was terrible for human health, and we needed to reduce our consumption of meat and other types of animal products. And so if you look at the Americas, from Canada in the north to Brazil, Argentina in the south, Uruguay, this is an economy, an agricultural economy that's based on animal agriculture and the grains that feed them, or the grasslands that feed them. I like to use your quote, Sir Donald, that about 70% of agricultural land is pasture, and it can't be used for anything else. And so there's this magnificent opportunity for animals to harvest that grass and convert it into high-quality protein for human beings, and dairy is one of those high-quality proteins. It's a vital food for human health. But also, there's 1 billion people in the world connected to the dairy sector. So those 1 billion people are helping feed the 8 billion people with a vital nutrition, a high-quality protein. So you look at the 3 pillars of sustainability: social, economic, environmental, and dairy hits all 3. And so when this narrative was being creative, that actually led to the narrative of the UN Food Systems Summit, or at least some of the peripheral narrative there, we thought it was really important for the Americas, the ministers of agriculture of the Americas, to discuss this and say, how are we going to contribute to this dialogue in a positive way that talks about how dairy and other sectors were part of the solution to climate change, but also had really important other aspects to it and other contributions to society, the environment, and the economy. So we convened the sectors, and we worked with you. We worked with the dairy sector, FAPALE, Ariel, the folks in the north, Canada, the United States, Mexico, and we convened forums about livestock, about dairy, about fruits and vegetables, about grains and oil seeds, etc., across a period of time where we were hit by a global pandemic, COVID, in which it became clear that agriculture was essential to our well-being, to our existence. And we worked first to convene all the ministers of agriculture to ensure that agriculture and agricultural workers were viewed as essential so they can go do their jobs and they can produce food. And we know that there were lots of outbreaks in plants and other places of agricultural workers, and it was a real challenge to keep food on the table and supply chains flowing. But it was really important that we first convened the ministers on a regular basis, and thank God for Zoom and modern technology that we were able to do all that. And we participated with a FAO in many of those discussions. Then we assembled all the ministers together again via Zoom, and we came up with 16 messages to convey to this UN Food Systems Summit about the importance of agriculture in the Americas. And they were really based on 3 fundamental premises. First, that farmers need to be at the table. We've heard it here a variety of times that if you're not at the table, you might be on the menu. So we were at the table and we were present there. That's not my quote. That was Arnold was using it as his quote, the head of the World Farmers Organization, but it's not his quote either. The second is that science, not political science, not aspirations, not ideology, but science must be the foundation of public policy. Sure, public policy should be aspirational, but it should be based on science, or where do you want to get? And third is that agriculture needs to be part of the solutions for some of the things that I just talked about, for the 3 pillars of sustainability. And so in that context, we were very active. We presented these positions to the UN Food Systems Summit, pre-summit in Rome and then in New York. We followed that up with putting I've lost the mic. Maybe I'm just talking too much. Is it still on? Yeah? Okay. We followed that up with the UN, with the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, in which the heads of state put food security on the agenda, and that led to the COP27, where we had this first pavilion or home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas, to say that agriculture is part of the solution, to bring ministers like we did this time, and to have a home for farmers, ranchers, the industry, that talked about the positive contributions of all aspects of agriculture, but in particular livestock and dairy to society, to the environment, to being part of the solution for climate change. And that's led us again to the COP28, I guess it is now, in wherever we are in Dubai, where agriculture is on the table. It didn't get in the declaration, but it's on the table. We're here again. It was noted with the food declaration. We had a very good event with some of our ministers, Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Matos of Uruguay. Were on the stage yesterday discussing the importance of what they're doing and what farmers and ranchers and all the Americas are doing. And so we're here at the COP, and agriculture is being noted, and it's thanks to partnership with all the members on the stage and all of you here and out there in Cyberland, in which I think finally we're not at the kiddie table. We're actually at the table. We have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of work to do, both to be present in these discussions, but also to show solutions, to show the kind of innovations that you all have been talking about, and to work with Ignacio here and helping finance those elements, because that's the real challenge. We need finance for all that. And so we convene the ministers of agriculture here together to talk about different aspects and elements of financing. And so that's what we're doing here at COP. It's the last day. It's the penultimate panel. And we thank you for putting this together, Don.
Oh, fantastic. Look, thank you, Lloyd. And one of the things that I think about when I'm talking to people about the Pathways to Dairy Net Zero initiative, this is, as announced last year by CAF, actually, at the main plenary in COP, this is a different way of doing things. This is a public-private partnership that brings together private sector organizations, public sector utility organizations, as well as the International Finance Institution, to try and find ways to move faster. And that would be my message to anyone who happens to be listening from particularly the international finance organizations, the need for us to find ways to move faster, because some of the processes, as we've discovered, as we've worked through this, 2 years to create a Green Climate Fund bid, etc., if we're facing the existential threat that we all believe we are, waiting 2 years to start to even submit the proposal before you actually get into the financing piece of it, it's too long. So we need to find ways to shorten that. I'm going to ask for questions from the audience now. You've got representatives from a government who's involved in this program, from a global organization in the form of FAO, who are providing technical leadership in climate change from an agriculture perspective. We've got CAF, one of the leading banks in terms of a Latin American perspective, and also an accredited entity to the Green Climate Fund. And we have got a representative from a regional organization that's driving the messaging around agriculture. So I have got actually a couple of questions that have come in on text from people who are watching this online, but I'd like to go to the audience here first. Don't be shy. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Kurt?
Could we move them? Thanks.
Hello, my name is Emma DeBelco. I am a researcher from Indiana University. I was wondering, Donald, you've mentioned that the Global Dairy Platform has aligned itself with the Global Methane Pledge. How has your work also been either aligned with or sort of following the Global Methane Pledge? Thank you.
You want me to take it? No, to keep on it. Yes, so the Global Methane Pledge has been a partner in this big partnership, if I may be redundant, that we're putting together. In fact, delegates of the Global Methane Pledge participated in our first meeting in December 2022,
Yep.
2022. And then also in our workshops throughout the year, the regional workshop and the national workshops. We are receiving constant technical assistance from them to make sure that methane considerations are part of the proposal. So yeah, they are part of what we're doing.
So
But probably Donald would like to weigh in a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just add a few bits. So Global Dairy Platform, we signed up to the Global Methane Pledge. I think we might still be the only agricultural commodity that actually committed to the Global Methane Pledge to reduce methane by 30% by 2030. That's an intensity target for agriculture from the Methane Pledge as opposed to an absolute target. The Methane Pledge were instrumental in helping us to identify the 10 countries that we've targeted through Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, and they were the ones who then got the US State Department involved to approach the ministers of agriculture and introduced us to the Green Climate Fund. So, when you think about the very genesis of Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, the Methane Pledge, US State Department, Global Dairy Platform, Green Climate Fund, they've all been there from the very beginning, so very heavily involved. Sure, please.
One of the challenges, the Global Methane Hub is also part of the group that is developing the initiative. We signed the Global Methane Pledge, but we are in this situation that Maria Mercedes was mentioning, that is a cross-cutting initiative, that we are developing, so adaptation is there. And it was really interesting to have the discussions with the Global Methane Hub about how we can actually work on emissions at the same time that we work on adaptation and we don't get people expelled from the rural areas. We don't want leave people behind. We don't want farmers to leave their work because of this, but we want to try to find synergies and how to bring emissions together with water quality and biodiversity, and how we find the best solutions to this win-win-win-win, and I'm not sure how many wins we want to find. And it was really interesting to have these discussions, because sometimes you have the pressure to reduce emissions, and the world is making this pressure to reduce emissions, and then at the same time we're dealing with people that are vulnerable, and we don't want them to be more fragile because of this. So we need to find these solutions, and the Global Methane Hub played a role there, also investing in new research, new technologies, try to bring together experiments and new evidence from other places to try to make them fit into our initiative, so we can actually get this target of not losing anyone.
Lloyd, I know you want to come in on this, I can see.
Yeah, I couldn't understand your sign language, Donald. But
so you then me was the sign language.
Okay.
So we got to get this sorted out for the next one, Lloyd.
Maria mentioned something really important that I think applies not just in Uruguay, but pretty much globally, is that farmers are aging and that they don't want to invest in new technologies because they don't want to get in that credit, they don't want to leave debt and other things. And so the Methane Hub, the banks, other instruments of finance are key in order to help farmers make those decisions and maybe get their youth to come on board and stay in the farm and things like that. And Donald, while you're not paying attention here, one of your compatriots in one of your countries of origin or citizenship is our ag contact at the Methane Hub that I met with when I was in Uruguay. So Hayden was talking about how this is private sector funded, and if we can get that private sector money out into specific projects where we know what to do in order to reduce methane in dairy, in livestock, in rice, then hopefully, the finance will flow from other mechanisms, and we can blend some of that finance in order to make to have case studies on the ground, just like we were talking about those 3 countries where we all been working, Colombia, Costa Rica, Uruguay, in order to have a model for the rest of the hemisphere and dairies everywhere, to start reducing methane emissions, which we know we can do.
Okay, I'm going to rattle off a number of questions that we've... is there another question from the floor? Okay, we're just conscious of time. We don't want to run over, Lloyd, unless you haven't got another event immediately after us.
We do have another event, and we're going to have to kick you out.
Yeah, so I'm just going to rattle off the questions that we have remaining that have come in. We've actually got quite a few questions from online, so I'm going to rattle those off, and then I'm going to let you each decide if you want to address one of them in a minute or two, so not long, lengthy speeches. There's a question about sustainability practices being adopted in American dairy farms to address environmental concerns. I think we somewhat touched on that, but you may want to add something more. There's another one about does use of technology and innovation in dairy farming contribute to global sustainability in agriculture? I think the answer is yes, but we might want to address that a little more. And then going to the other ones, one I liked, Maria, and that was you mentioned the fact that we're seeing farmers getting older and the difficulty of bringing youth onto farm, and they haven't quite worded it this way. But what have we got to do to make farming sexy, to bring people back to the rural communities and back to farming? So that's a question that's come in. And Maria Mercedes, there was a question directed to you, which was, where might the dairy sector in the region focus collaborative activity across countries to accelerate a more sustainable sector that delivers food security and viable livelihoods, and of course lower greenhouse gases? So quite a broad-ranging question as well. So just before I do that, I just want to reflect on this last discussion around emissions, etc. And I remember last year when we had COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and the executive director of the Green Climate Fund was announcing the initial funding, $3.5 million for the program, to develop its submission in Eastern Africa. And he said this program is not just about emissions reduction. It's also about adaptation. It's about mitigation. It's about livelihoods. It's about women's empowerment. It's about youth employment. And one of the things we need to keep in mind is that as we develop the dairy sector going forward, we need to keep all of these elements, all of these in balance. We can't pull the lever and reduce emissions and create a biodiversity crisis or create a nutritional crisis. So this is a complex topic that we're trying to address through this program, and I think we're making great progress. But with that, back to my panel, and we'll start at this end and go back down again. So Maria, just...
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so there's a lot. I have many questions, and I haven't actually read them all out, but I think the question that was really being directed to you was, how do you think we can make dairy or agriculture more attractive so that we do encourage young people to see it as a career and an opportunity? And I know you and I talked about this exact issue yesterday.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what to do. What we know is that there is like a gap. Young people move to the cities and they have access to different things, and then they don't want to go back to rural areas and lose all these services and opportunities and this idea that dairy work is really rough and you need to wake up at 4 a.m. and it's like it's not that attractive. But technologies are there, and information systems are there, artificial intelligence is there, and one of the things is how we can bring that into the rural areas so it is more attractive. And the other thing is that many of the young agronomists, for instance, that they studied abroad, that they want to develop new initiatives, new business, they don't have the money to buy a land and develop their own project. Well, I mean, we know few of them, but normally they are rich guys that inherited the land, and they have the flexibility to make trials and fail. But many other people have not. They don't have this chance. So one of the things that we are thinking is about how to create these opportunities for them to stay in rural areas, but with access to financial opportunities to work in the rural areas and not being indebted forever, and having the services nearby, so they can actually have a proper life.
Thank you. Thank you. And Maria Mercedes, quickly, because we're going to get thrown out by Lloyd, in terms of your thoughts about collaborative action that could be taken across the countries to accelerate transformation. Any thoughts you'd like to share on that, or any other topic you would like to address?
The collaborative action definitely on job creations. And that's one way also to keep youth coming back to the because of everything that Nube just mentioned and everything that Lloyd just mentioned, and unlocking climate finance for the dairy sector is also aiming to strengthen it's not only about technical assistance and capacities for the production, dairy production itself, but also how that is added to the value chain, and that is going to create income for the farmers, and it's going to create jobs, and that is going to increase the value of the whole chain, and that is going to become appealing when you have an income, when you have a job, when you then it is attractive for you. Then it only not the youth, but also anyone that is needing a job is going to come back, and that is something that countries can also start partnering in, and also can start exchanging in, and also innovation. When it comes to climate change, mitigation, adaptation in the dairy sector, innovation is the key, and countries need to start exchanging. Ministries of Agriculture, we have the platform of climate action in agriculture that we run in FAO. It's the Ministries of Agriculture of 16 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that are exchanging constantly on different issues on climate action, and one of them is for sure dairy sector, climate change adaptation and mitigation practices. That's definitely the key. Exchanging and innovation, and how voluntary knowledge exchange can definitely help.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. There is a question for CAF that had come up as well, Nacho, so I'll just quickly read that to you, and it was, what are the opportunities that CAF see for dairy in the regions in terms of delivering on food security? So I guess a broader question, perhaps.
As I say at the beginning, agriculture for the region, both in terms of its food consumption, but also in terms of the overall food production and systems at global scale, is a key part of the conversation in terms of implementation and action. And some of the countries that we are assisting in the process of working in this project, we also see that in the framework of public policy as a whole, where there is a specific emphasis and let's say a deeper conversation in terms of dairy as part of the relevance of food, and again in our overall policies, including those of environment. And in that regard, again, we see ourselves as a facilitator and somehow try to deploy that finance that is out there, and the way that we build the narrative and also the project, the way that we build this relationship in terms of how we can deliver the specific results in terms of mitigation, adaptation, also ecosystems can actually bring investors in. The business model around dairy and some of the issues that were discussed about jobs, and also the tendency of people getting out of the process, and also how to bring them in. I believe that on the issue of ecosystems and nature and the relationship between production and those may be also a key part or ingredient in terms of a new somehow a new way of producing, and also perhaps even a new product somehow that emerges, and that may be interest for the market and as well as for farmers as well.
Lloyd, I'm going to give you the last word in terms of the panel today. So your thoughts to close us out?
Well, I look over at that picture and I heard Maria Mercedes talk about innovation, and she's from Ecuador, and last year we were in that beautiful country and we went up to a dairy farm that looked kind of like that, and it was a net zero dairy farm. And I think innovation's already in the sector. It's getting that innovation to the farms, whether it's old farmers or young farmers. And I'm thinking also about some of the panels that we had here over the course of 2 weeks about the circular economy and about how you can use every element within an integrated farm in order to put it to work in the bioeconomy, energy, animal feed, and then the nutrition that comes from the cows, etc. There's so much happening in the world of agriculture. In California, they've reduced methane emissions by 40% already, and they did it like that. If we could get the kind of financing, I'm looking at you, in order to do that everywhere and to utilize that innovation that Maria Mercedes talked about and get it in the hands of farmers, farm associations, and ministries to actually implement projects and not wait years to do that, I think agriculture can be sexy. Dairy can be sexy. I think COVID, if anything, taught us that we need to go back to nature a little bit. And, who wouldn't want to be on a beautiful farm like that and helping feed the world and doing it with the most modern technology possible? We've opened up a Center for Interpretation of the Future of Agriculture at IICA, where we have brought 12,000 students this year to look at innovative solutions that make agriculture attractive as a career. And so we're hoping that with partnerships with all of our partners and ministries, will really maybe eventually turn the dial on that and get more youth interested in agriculture. So
Fantastic.
With that, I'll close out. And thank you, Donald, for your leadership in this sector. You've done a wonderful job.
And I think you've given us part of the secret sauce, and the other piece we need, as I think Maria Nube was talking about, is how do we make sure that the next generation have the capacity, the capability to finance their transition into agriculture as well, because the entry point is kind of high, and we've got to find ways that we creatively finance and encourage that to happen as well. With that, I know we're over time, Lloyd, and my apologies, but let me thank our panel one more time. Maria Nube from the Uruguayan government, Maria Mercedes Parano from FAO Regional Office, Nacho from CAF, and Lloyd Day from IICA. So thank you to our panelists for today. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention also Ariel Londinsky. So thank you to Ariel. And thank you to you for sticking with us through one of the last sessions at COP28. So appreciate your time today as well. Thank you.